So I believe we're now live. We'll just give it a minute for some people to join into the room, and then we'll introduce. Right. Welcome everyone to our second puppy parenting class on behalf of Burns Pet Nutrition and Admiral Insurance. We're really excited today. We're joined by one of the really key members at Burns. It's Emma Lee. And Emma is a nutritionist at Burns. And so she has been there for about 5 years, if I remember correctly. And
5 years now, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I could talk to Emma for ages as a dog owner, and likewise, everyone who's watching as a dog owner, you can speak to Emma for ages about dogs, their behavior, and what they're eating, what they shouldn't be eating. So I'm going to leave it to Emma to discuss all things nutrition. And yeah, we can then jump back on in about 10-15 minutes for any questions, start sending through. And yeah, I'm sure we'll all have a few things to ask.
Yeah, that's the way.
No, I don't want Mia. There we go. Perfect. Emma.
Okay, so there were some sort of key topics that people were keen for me to sort of speak about today on this puppy class. It is sort of specific to puppies, obviously, so but we do get asked very similar questions for adult dogs as well. So the first sort of key question really was puppy feeding, how much and how often? So if we look at how often, there isn't really any hard or fast science around this. Obviously, smaller, more frequent meals are going to be easier for your puppies to digest. Puppies need a lot more fuel than adult dogs. They need fuel for growth. So per kilo, they're probably going to be fed a bit more than an adult dog. So sort of, stretching that out over the day is sometimes beneficial for puppies. Most people will feed sort of 3 to 4 meals a day up until about 6 months of age. And then once the puppy sort of hits 6 months of age, a lot of people, particularly with smaller breeds, will drop that to 2 meals a day. Again, same as adult dogs, there aren't any sort of set rules unless you've got a breed that's prone to bloat, or there are medical reasons for feeding more meals a day. So at that point, then you can sort of, do whatever fits in for your individual dog and for your circumstances, your routine. People have got to fit feeding in around and sort of school runs, work routines and things like that. The important thing that we're looking at really in regards to sort of daily feeding is the feeding amounts. It's really important that you are following the guidelines. Now, they are only guidelines, so they're a starting point. Sometimes you may need to tweak those. Companies will set their sort of feeding guidelines for their food based on a variety of factors. For example, here at Burns, we look at the sort of, the digestibility of the food as well as one of the factors that we take into consideration. And so it's important that you're not overfeeding, that your puppy's getting what they need, that those needs aren't being exceeded. We know studies have shown that overnutrition it plays a big factor in the development of joint disease. So when I say overnutrition, what do I mean? So too much of something in the diet. So that might be that there's too much of a particular nutrient, or it might be that there's just too much in general. You've got these big sort of rapid growth spurts. These aren't particularly healthy, especially not for your large and giant breeds. So what we want to promote is a slow and steady growth. So it's really important, that you're not giving that overnutrition to your puppies. You're not overfeeding. We don't want fat puppies. I think people are very used to seeing fat puppies, roly-poly puppies, that when they then see a lean puppy, they tend to panic. I can feel the ribs. You should be able to easily feel the puppy's ribs. They should be a nice, lean, healthy weight. They shouldn't be fat. They shouldn't be chubby or roly-poly. That sort of added pressure then is also going to impact those developing joints. So if we flip that around, then one of the questions we do sort of commonly get asked is fussy puppies. My puppy stopped eating, my puppy's not eating as much as they once were. I'm putting the food down, I'm having to change the food a lot, I'm having to add things to the food to encourage the puppy to eat. Puppies and dogs that become fussy are typically made fussy. So by that I mean, if a puppy suddenly stops eating, we panic. As a species, we're feeders. We like to see our puppies eat. We panic and we tend to do things like chop and change the food. So the puppy's constantly expecting, sort of different textures, different flavors, different smells. And if that's not changed frequently, then they can start to turn their nose up and wait for that to happen. We tend to sort of panic and start to add things to the food. So some of the things that I've had people on the helpline tell me that they're adding to their puppy's food have been gravies, grated cheese, shredded chicken. If the puppy doesn't need the food that you're putting down, so if the puppy is a nice healthy weight and all of a sudden they stop eating as much as they were before, they probably just don't need those calories anymore. Their rapid growth has probably slowed down. They're getting into the sort of the junior stage now. We need to look at reducing those feeding amounts. It's important that you're establishing a routine when you're feeding your puppies, and you're not filling them up on treats and extras as well. It is difficult because, as a dog trainer as well, I'm using treats. I'm telling people to reward good behaviors that they want from their puppies. But for the most part, using your puppy's daily allowance, particularly if you're feeding a kibble, will be sufficient for the majority of the training that you do for them. You may have to switch to higher value treats for things like recall, but for the most part, you can just take some of their kibble from their daily allowance. So just be careful you're not filling up on treats and extras. Things like chews, if you're giving your puppy things to chew on, they can be quite high calorie, quite high protein. Protein is linked to satiety, so it may be affecting their appetite. But on the whole, if you've got a puppy and they're a healthy weight and all of a sudden they're not eating as much as they used to, it's usually a big sign that they don't need those extra calories now, and it's time to reduce their feeding amounts. When you're establishing a routine for your puppy as well, make sure that it's, it fits in with your routine. You don't want to be chopping and changing that routine then because it all of a sudden doesn't fit around what you're doing. Puppies will be much more settled if things are predictable. So establishing a good feeding routine, not leaving food down all day. You don't want to sort of encourage grazing for the most part. So if you pop the food down, 10-15 minutes, the puppy hasn't eaten it and you take it away, they'll soon get used to sort of eating within that time frame. We also get asked a lot about obviously upset digestion. It's a very, very common complaint with puppy owners. We saw yesterday from the class with John and Ben that it was one of the things they most commonly see puppies for. So with upset digestion, in puppies, particularly in young puppies, it's rarely an allergy. Allergies are quite rare, sort of full stop really, particularly when related to diet. Allergies and intolerances are different. So when you're looking at an allergy, you're looking at the involvement of the immune system. With intolerances, intolerances can be to specific ingredients. They can be dose related. So by that I mean sometimes it's not what you're feeding, but how much. So again, we're looking at those feeding amounts. Is the puppy being overfed? Overfeeding as well can also compromise the digestibility of the food. So it could be that the food is in effect really going straight through them. The body's not digesting it effectively, absorbing it effectively. They're not getting the nutrients they need from it. It's coming out the other end as sort of soft or loose stools. Sometimes we see that the stools will be normal for a few days and then the system almost seems to have this breakdown. That can be another telltale sign really that the puppy is being fed too much. Again, really important that you're looking at treats that you're given as well when you're looking at digestive upset and sensitive tummies. It could be that you're feeding a food that really suits your puppy really well, but the treats that you're giving for recall or the treats that you're given when you're training a settle command or a stationary command or any kind of command really. It could be that it's something in those treats. Treats should be that. They should be treats. They shouldn't be given all of the time. They should be given as a treat. It stops becoming a treat if it becomes part of the daily allowance. They should only make up about 10% of your puppy's daily allowance as well. And because they're treats, they typically tend to be higher in things like fat, And so therefore giving too much of those can cause digestive upset as well. Puppies will also put anything and everything in their mouth. They will scavenge outside, they will drink from muddy puddles. So, if you've got a puppy with an upset digestion and that goes on for a while, it is always worth getting that checked out by your vet. With young puppies as well, particularly it's important you keep up to date with worming. Make sure that you are, finding out the worming schedule from the breeder. Make sure that you're following, the way they've been feeding the puppy for the first week or so until the puppy's settled in. Introduce any new foods gradually. But mostly we would be looking at sort of feeding amounts and is the puppy digesting the food effectively. If you are looking at an intolerance or an allergy, so if it has been sort of decided that is the route that it's looking like you need to go down, the gold standard for that is to do what we call an elimination diet process. So to do that, same as in adult dogs as well, you would feed a diet with a novel protein source, because it's typically the protein that there's been a reaction to rather than the carb or the grain. So you feed that, so novel protein source, and only that for a set period of time. And this is where most people fall down, because obviously you're not allowed to give treats and extras. And then if the issue resolves, you can introduce the extras one at a time. And if there's a reaction, then obviously you know exactly what the puppy is reacting to. I would say, from my experience on the helpline and my experience training puppies, I've been training puppies for about 13 years now, it's usually linked either to overfeeding or dietary indiscretion, if it is diet related. So if it's not parasite related or bacteria related, it is usually because the puppy's being overfed. So whether that's overfed their food, or then loads of treats and extras being piled on, or there's been a dietary indiscretion. So they've gotten into the bin, they've picked up, I don't know, a mouldy sandwich on their walk, or, sort of things like that, really. So in young puppies, we wouldn't be instantly jumping to allergies or intolerances. So I touched on sort of dietary indiscretions there. So, what shouldn't we feed our puppies? There are quite a few things that we need to be careful of when we're looking at, particularly if we're adding extras into the diet from our plate. So if the puppy is having sort of, human food or table scraps, whatever you want to call them. So there are certain things that we need to be careful of, really. So things like anything from the onion or leek family. So onions, particularly toxic. We're looking at things like grapes, raisins, chocolate. We're coming up to Christmas. It's sort of festive season is about to start, so there's usually quite a few sort of goodies on the go that involve chocolate, particularly if you've got kids or not. In my case, just a lot of chocolate on the go, regardless. So you need to be really careful what your puppies have got access to. Particularly, as you're putting up your decorations and things like that, hanging sort of chocolate things on the tree. Another thing you need to be wary of is something called xylitol. So xylitol is an artificial sweetener, and it is present in some foods. So, for example, some peanut butters. We live in a society now where enrichment is a big sort of buzzword for puppies. So we're using things like Kongs, licky mats, things to keep puppies entertained. Give them some enrichment, sort of breed-specific outlets and things like that. So if you are using things like peanut butters, it's fine to use, a peanut butter that you can get from the local supermarket, but you need to make sure it doesn't have this xylitol in. Xylitol is sort of present in chewing gum, so that's where it's most commonly found. So it can be very harmful to your dogs and to your puppies. Too many fatty foods as well. Again, I think most vets would report an increase in things like sort of pancreatitis over the Christmas period. We don't want to be overloading the system with fat. It can cause digestive upset. It can cause other issues as well. And mouldy foods. So getting into the bins, scavenging behaviours. Puppies are renowned for it. They do pick everything up. They like everything to go in their mouth. So we need to be careful there. So keeping bins out of the way, food bins particularly. Some molds can be, sort of particularly damaging to dogs, and we've been looking at things like kidney injury and things like that. So fatty foods, probably the subject that we talk about the most on the helpline really is weight management in dogs. So how do you tell that your puppy is overweight? Now, there's been a big increase in the sort of small fluffy breeds, cockapoos, things like that, with these big heavy coats. So it can be quite difficult to sort of gauge just by looking at them. So it's really important that you're getting hands-on with your puppy. We need to do what we call body condition scoring. So what you need to be able to feel with your puppy is you need to be able to easily feel their ribs. So if they've got a heavy coat, you need to get your fingers right underneath that coat, easily feel the ribs. They should go in at the waist and tuck up at the tummy. You need to be feeding to target weight if your puppy is overweight, not current weight. So if you are feeding the food where you are feeding to the puppy's current weight and not predicted adult weight, you need to make sure that you're feeding to the weight that the puppy should be if they're overweight. Similarly, if they could do with gaining a bit as well. So it's ideal weight that you're aiming for, really. So I think that was sort of pretty much it for the common themes, really. So have we had any questions in?
I was going to ask you a couple actually that I was going to bring up. I was speaking to your colleague Orla actually, who's also doing a class a bit later on. Yeah. She was saying that something that rang true with me as a dog owner, that dogs are really opportunist and they'll beg for food even when they're not hungry. So you see that a lot in you see that a lot in dogs like labs and stuff. Obviously, you know, aka how true is that? And why are they continuously like begging for food? Are they actually hungry? Because we start to feel guilty and keep feeding them. And rather than feeding them twice a day, you might end up feeding them more often because you're like worried they might be hungry.
Yeah. So a common conversation that I have with owners on the helpline, they ring in, my puppy's really hungry, they're always looking for food. Okay, so what do you do when your puppy's looking for food? Well, I feed it. So you're reinforcing the behavior.
Yeah.
So dogs will continue to repeat behaviors that yield good results for them. So if a behavior is being reinforced, then they'll continue to do it. And it then becomes a training issue or a behavior issue rather than a nutrition issue. Labradors are a little bit different because Labradors, their genetics are slightly different. And it's not uncommon for them to always feel hungry. They haven't got the gene that switches that off. So, that sort of hungry Labrador, there are things that you can do to help a dog to feel a little bit more satisfied that aren't going to sort of, ramp up the calories. Things like adding vegetables to your dog's food. Calorie-wise, they're sort of negligible, really, but they're going to add a bit of fibre, a bit more sort of substance to the diet then, and help the dog to feel a bit fuller. But dogs are scavengers. They're scavengers, and if the opportunity arises, usually, unless you've done some pretty heavy training around that, then if you've left a biscuit on the side and you turned your back and the dog thinks, "Oh, I can reach that," the likelihood is they're going to do it. Yeah. Particularly because you're in the process of training them, so they're still learning. So managing that to begin with is really important. So not giving them the opportunity to practice the behaviour, but that's all about your management systems then at home.
Outside of the Labrador, then are those other dogs, are they actually hungry or are they just chancing it or just testing?
Usually, they're just chancing it. They could be hungry. I'm always hungry. I could always eat. Anyone who works with me will tell you that. It doesn't mean I should always eat. I'd be the size of a house if I did. So similarly with your dogs, if they're a nice healthy weight, they're healthy, they've got no medical concerns, their stools are always firm and formed. They don't need the food. They don't need it. They're just, a lot of the time, it's yielded them results, so they're going to try it again. They've given you the puppy dog eyes and you've taken a treat out of the treat barrel.
Yeah.
My Cocker Spaniel particularly is, less said about that, the better, really.
I'm similar. which is why I was going to ask a question we had through actually. That's quite an interesting one, was about for those puppies, obviously they're really soft when you first get them. Is it true to say that the food, depending on what food you give them, that will keep their coat smoother and softer?
Yeah, so pretty much if you're feeding a complete and balanced diet, it should be providing all the sort of things that they need to maintain healthy skin and coat. So you're looking at things like essential fatty acids, we're looking at the omegas. So, you know, one of the plus sides of feeding a complete food is that you know that they're getting everything they need, that you're hitting all of those markers. Again, going back to overfeeding, I know it sounds like I've been sort of, you know, banging on quite a bit about overfeeding, but it is an issue that we do see a lot. If you are feeding too much, there will be a buildup of waste in the system, so a buildup of metabolic waste in the system. The skin is the largest organ, and so the body's going to try and get rid of that waste. So typically we will tend to see things like dry, scurfy coat, flaky skin, anal gland issues, itchiness. You know, all of those things, we do need to look at how much the dog is eating as well as what they're eating before we start looking at things like, you know, supplementation.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. One of the less talked about facts that not just puppies but dogs in general, I had it with mine last week, that they tend to try and eat poo. Is that because other dogs do that? Is that because it's got traces of food in it? How can you stop that, and then why?
Yeah, so that can be a factor. When you're looking at puppies, particularly very young puppies, it's quite a natural behaviour. They will learn it from their mum. So mum, when puppies are first born, will clean up after them. As sort of disgusting as it is for us to think about, it's very natural for them. Some puppies will sort of just naturally stop that. Others won't and will continue. They'll continue maybe because there's undigested food particles in the other animals that they're living with, and they're eating those feces. If they're eating their own feces, there might be undigested food particles in their own feces. If there is, then you're looking at, you know, why aren't they digesting their food effectively? And again, that ties back into, is the system just overwhelmed? Is it having too much? Is the food that they're on not suiting them? The issue is it will very quickly become a habit. And that goes back to the reinforcing of behaviour. So what tends to happen, well, it tastes nice for the puppy, so that's reinforcing enough as it is. But what tends to happen is we see our puppies go to eat some poo and we go, oh my God, no. And we run over and there's this big release of adrenaline and there's this big fuss made, and the puppy thinks, oh, this is great. This is a game. It's fantastic. I can do this again. So, you know, we inadvertently do reinforce the behavior as well. It can be a sign of digestive upset, so it can be a sign that there's an issue there in the system. So we also do need to be looking at that. So we'd be looking at, you know, the puppy's weight, the stools, the consistency, how often are they going, how often are they fed, what are they fed, how much are they fed. But typically, particularly sort of if they carry it on into adulthood, it can be because it's become a habit. When we're looking at it in adult dogs, if they've not done it, if they've never done it before, and then all of a sudden you've got a 6-year-old dog that started to eat its own feces, or you know, the feces of the dog that it's living with, I would be looking at, you know, what has upset here, what has upset the system here. Is the dog having too much of something? Have they had, you know, have they recently had a gut problem, you know, a case of digestive upset that has unbalanced things. So it can be a sign that there is something wrong in the system, but we would sort of do a bit more digging and a bit more investigation into the issue.
Thank you. That's really useful. And we've had a question actually from Katie, who's asked, is it okay to mix wet and dry puppy food together?
Yeah, you can mix wet and dry foods together. You need to make sure that they're both suitable for puppies. So, for example, with our wet foods, you know, they're not suitable for very young puppies to be used as the main part of the diet. So we'd only recommend them as a topper. But, you know, if you're feeding a dry and a wet food, they're both suitable for puppies. Again, the most important thing that you're looking at there is your feeding amounts. There are some important things to consider when you're looking at wet foods for dogs of any age. They're typically around about 75% moisture, so you will have to feed a lot more for it to be sort of nutritionally comparative to the dry food. They tend to be higher in protein and fat. So if you have got a puppy that's a bit on the chubby side, perhaps ease off the wet food and concentrate more on a good quality dry food. The fact that they're sort of higher in protein as well can it just all links into that overnutrition. But the important thing is that you're not overfeeding. You're mixing your ratios correctly.
Excellent. And I've had another question through via Facebook from Shelley. Should this be a concern, and will it cause any upset damage? Sorry, what she's. My dog eats. Can you see that?
Yeah. Dogs will copy each other. Particularly, if you've got a multi-dog household, so I've got 6, they're more likely to copy each other than they are to copy me, because they're the same species. So, they can communicate easier with each other. I wouldn't be massively concerned, as in I wouldn't massively panic about it. But what you would be looking at is if it's only just started, double check your dog's feeding amounts, have a look at your own dog's, at the dog that's eating the other dog's poo, have a look at their stools. Are they digesting their food effectively? Is there something going on in the system there? Same with the other dog as well. If they're producing sort of loose, sloppy stools, the likelihood is there's undigested food in there, and therefore it's appealing. But then you're looking at sort of training, so teaching an effective sort of leave and a good recall, so that you can leave should mean to sort of back away from something, so you can get them to back away and then recall them to you, and then just being really good with your husbandry, really. So making sure that you're picking things up. The less they practice it, the less likely they are to keep repeating it. But if it has become a habit, it will be sort of more of a training issue, really. If you want us to have a look sort of specifically more in detail at your dogs and their situation, by all means give us a ring on the helpline. There are 5 of us, Monday to Friday 8 to 5, and we can sort of take some more details about your dogs and your situation and help you.
Thank you. I hope that answered the question, Shelley. I've got 2 more really quick questions for you. One, if you've got a puppy and you want to feed it something human related, what would you recommend? Would you say chicken, little chicken bites? Or I won't even tell you what some of the things I've fed my puppy.
The big no-no, obviously the toxic, the things that I've already talked about, so anything that could be toxic. I would also steer clear of very fatty foods. I would also not tend to go to add in meats and add in proteins. If I'm going to add things, so my Springer Lab cross, she's 10 months old now, and in true Labrador style, she would eat all day. So I do tend to add. She gets vegetables mainly added into her food. So carrots, broccoli. She loves broccoli. Also, as well, giving her sort of the broccoli stalk will keep her entertained for quite a bit, and she likes to chew on that. Cauliflower, green beans, peas. They do get the odd bit of sweet potato, pumpkin. Halloween's coming up. I baked a whole portion that up for the dogs the other day. It's a fantastic source of fiber. It's a good prebiotic. It feeds those good bacteria in the gut. So I'd be looking at sort of vegetables. As my first port of call. I probably wouldn't add in meats and things like that unless there was a need to do so. But you can use things like chicken as like a high value reward if you're teaching a recall, for example. But I certainly wouldn't be thinking about adding it to the diet.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. How many dogs did you say you had?
6.
You said that. That's already surprising. Wow, that is a lot. Well, it's been half an hour, so thank you so much, Emma.
No problem.
It's been great. And just to reiterate what you said, if people who've been listening in do have any questions, absolutely reach out to the guys.
Absolutely. Check out our website, live chat, email, phone call. Just get in touch.
Yeah.
We've heard it all. No question is left.
So Shelley, obviously I know you'd sent a couple of messages in afterwards as well, so feel free to reach out to Emma. That would be great. And we hope to see you on the next puppy parenting class. We've got England lioness striker Beth England, who is the owner of two lovely golden retrievers. She's going to be talking. So that's going to be a really exciting one as well. So thank you to everyone again. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.